approximately 30 days to complete. So we'll need to come back for sentencing no earlier than 30 days. When would the parties wish?
The moment Hakeem Ksoo Robinson heard those guilty verdicts ring out in that Jacksonville courtroom, his entire world shattered. Based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of the offense, the court does hereby remand you to the custody of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. But what cut the deepest wasn't the sentence. It was the betrayal from his own blood that sealed his fate. Sitting here today, you realize that you were testifying against not only co-defendants, but family members. Yes. Why are you doing that? I've got the details from the betrayal to Ksoo's wild reaction as he faces the brutal reality of life behind bars. Let's get into it. Ksoo's world crumbles, the verdict that changed everything. When that gavel dropped on July 31st, 2025, Hakeem Ksoo Robinson stood up slowly at the defense table, his face painted with pure disbelief. The 26-year-old ATK rapper had just been found guilty of first-degree murder in the killing of Charles Lil Buck McCormick Jr., and the weight of that mandatory life sentence, without parole, was hitting him like a sledgehammer to the chest. The courtroom footage captured every raw emotion as Ksoo turned to look back at his family in the gallery, seeing emotional relatives, watching their loved one's fate being sealed. He shook his head repeatedly. That signature headshake that would become viral across social media platforms within hours. His body language told the whole story. Slumped shoulders, lingering glances at family, and that look of a man who knew his rap career, his freedom, his entire life as he knew it was over. But this wasn't just any murder conviction. This was the culmination of a 7-day trial in Duval County Court that began in late July 2025. The case centered around the January 15th, 2020 execution-style killing of Lil Buck, a 23-year-old rapper with loose ties to the rival KTA gang. What made this murder even more cold-blooded was the timing. It happened exactly 1 year to the day after Ksoo's half-brother, Willie Boss Goon Addison, was gunned down, making it clear this wasn't random violence, but calculated revenge. The evidence against Ksoo was overwhelming, painting a picture of premeditated murder that would make even the hardest street soldiers cringe. Prosecutors presented dashcam footage showing the shooter chasing and firing at McCormick, with the victim trying desperately to escape before being gunned down in broad daylight. The state's case was built on more than just video evidence, though. They had rap lyrics from Ksoo's songs that were interpreted as confessions, including lines about smoking Dirk and BBY to the face, and Instagram post with Lil Buck's photo caption, "Bye-bye." But the most devastating blow came from within Ksoo's own bloodline. Abdul Robinson Sr., known on the streets as Blue, took the witness stand and identified his own son as the shooter in that dashcam video. This wasn't just any witness. This was the man who helped found ATK, the same gang his son rode for, now pointing the finger directly at his own flesh and blood. The day that Charles McCormick was murdered on January 15th, 2020, does that specific day hold any significance for you and your family? Yes. And why is that day significant in your mind? It's the date that my son got killed. Who was your son that got killed? Will Allison? Is he your biological child? No. Do you still consider him to be your son? Yes, I consider him to be my son. The courtroom was silent as Blue testified, stating, "I know my kids," when asked to identify the shooter. This moment represented more than just testimony. It was a father choosing his own freedom over his son's life. Blue had cut a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to accessory charges and agreeing to testify against both his sons in exchange for reducing his potential 60-year sentence to just 76 months. The betrayal cut even deeper when you understand Blue's motivations. He cited health issues, including diabetes, high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, and failing kidneys, as reasons for cooperating. But it wasn't just about his health. Blue wanted to be there for his younger children, including an 8-year-old daughter.
Picture than the one presented by multiple witnesses.
So if I can give a description of how I describe my brother, I would say that I call him fat, slew-footed, which we would say 2 left feet. I call him stocky and tallest. He's a giant to me.
That physical description could be a key part of the defense's strategy in a direct challenge of the prosecution's case. With several eyewitnesses, including Jacksonville police officers, describing the shooter as shorter and slimmer and around 5'8", the Robinson counsel questions how their client can be the shooter when
and 6-year-old twins. He described the decision as the hardest I've had to make in my life, acknowledging it would make his life harder after release, and that life sentences for his sons might be worse than death. The family dynamics were already fractured, but Blue's testimony shattered whatever remained. Online reactions were mixed, with some viewing it as a father teaching accountability, while others labeled it outright betrayal. Comments flooded social media with reactions like, "Imagine the betrayal, and if my dad did this, I'd cry on the spot." The streets don't forgive snitching, especially when it comes from your own blood. But Ksoo wasn't the only family member caught up in this web of violence and betrayal. His brother Abdul Robinson Jr. was also charged with second-degree murder in the McCormick case and is set for a separate trial. Their cousin Leroy ATK Scotty Whitaker was tried alongside Ksoo as an accomplice and also found guilty of first-degree murder by a separate jury. The evidence against Whitaker was just as damaging. DNA evidence placed him at the scene, including his blood found on the victim's clothing after he cut himself jumping a fence during their escape. A loaded AR-15 rifle found in the getaway car was linked to Whitaker with the weapon set to fire and containing 26 rounds of ammunition, showing clear intent to kill. The prosecution's star witness was Dominique Butterbarner, the getaway driver, who accepted a plea deal reducing his potential life sentence to 20 years. Barner testified that Ksoo orchestrated the hit, detailing how they found McCormick's address online, waited outside his apartment, and followed him to the plaza where the murder occurred. The defense tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case, arguing that the shooter in the video appeared shorter and slimmer than Ksoo's 61 to 230 pounds frame. They also challenged the credibility of witnesses like Barner, noting his history of lying to police and multiple plea deals. But the mountain of evidence was too overwhelming. Fingerprints, DNA, cell phone data, and most damaging of all, his father's testimony. Sentencing is scheduled for the week of September 8, 2025, where Ksoo will officially receive his mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. But this conviction is just the beginning. He still faces another trial for the 2019 murder of 16-year-old Adrian BBY Gaynor Jr., where he could potentially receive another life sentence. So, we'll need to come back for sentencing no earlier than 30 days. When would the parties wish to return? The courtroom reactions captured in viral clips showed the raw emotion of a young man watching his life slip away. But they also revealed something deeper about the fractured state of Jacksonville's most notorious gang family. The same streets that made Ksoo a local legend were now demanding their pound of flesh. And the very family members who helped build ATK were the ones tearing it down from within. The betrayal, the violence, the endless cycle of revenge. It all led to this moment where a father had to choose between his freedom and his son's life. And he chose himself. Blood in the streets, the ATK vs KTA war that consumed Jacksonville. The roots of Jacksonville's deadliest gang feud run deeper than most people realize, stretching back to 2017, when territorial disputes and personal beefs began escalating between ATK, AC's top killers, and KTA. Kill Them All, also known as 6 Block. What started as neighborhood beef transformed into a full-scale war that would claim over a dozen lives and turn the city's drill rap scene into a literal battleground where diss tracks became death sentences. The spark that ignited this deadly feud came in June 2018 with the ambush at a Waycross, Georgia restaurant where ATK leader Yunjin Ace was shot 8 times, but survived while his brother Trayvon Bullard and 2 associates were killed. KTA was immediately blamed for the hit, and the streets knew this wasn't going to slide. But it was the killing of Willie Boss Goon Addison later that year in a drive-by shooting after a rap event that really set off the powder cake. Willie wasn't just another street soldier. He was Ksoo's half-brother and a respected figure in ATK.
The murder trial of Jacksonville rapper Hakeem Ksoo Robinson and his cousin Leroy Whitaker. It's one step closer to going to the jury. Closing arguments began this afternoon. Both men are charged in the 2020 shooting death of 23-year-old Charles Lil Buck McCormick Jr. Prosecutors say the motive involved a diss track McCormick created. News 4 Jax reporter Brianna Brownlee has been following this trial from the beginning. She's joining us now live outside the courthouse with the latest on this.
Yes, it was a day full of disruptions in the courtroom.
And his death would fuel a revenge campaign that's still claiming lives today. The first major retaliation came in February 2019 when 16-year-old Adrian BBY Gaynor Jr., a KTA-affiliated rapper, was shot over 60 times at Hilltop Village Apartments. Prosecutors would later charge Ksoo with this murder, alleging what started as neighborhood beef transformed into a full-scale war that would claim over a dozen lives and turn the city's drill rap scene into a literal battleground where diss tracks became death sentences. The spark that ignited this deadly feud came in June 2018 with the ambush at a Waycross, Georgia restaurant where ATK leader Yunjin Ace was shot 8 times, but survived while his brother Trayvon Bullard and 2 associates were killed. KTA was immediately blamed for the hit, and the streets knew this wasn't going to slide. But it was the killing of Willie Boss Goon Addison later that year in a drive-by shooting after a rap event that really set off the powder cake. Willie wasn't just another street soldier. He was Ksoo's half-brother and a respected figure in ATK, and his death would fuel a revenge campaign that's still claiming lives today. The first major retaliation came in February 2019 when 16-year-old Adrian BBY Gaynor Jr., a KTA-affiliated rapper, was shot over 60 times at Hilltop Village Apartments. Prosecutors would later charge Ksoo with this murder, alleging it was direct payback for Willie's death. BBY wasn't just some random target. He was tight with KTA's leadership, and his murder sent shock waves through the rival camp. This isn't just street violence. It's being broadcasted to the world through drill rap tracks that mock the dead and glorify the viral. ATK's Who I Smoke became a viral sensation with over 33 million views, featuring Spinabins, Wapawit Chapoa, Yunjin Ace, and Fast Money Goon dancing over the graves of their rivals, while rapping Who I Smoke Bibby and Who I Smoke Buck. The track was built over a Vanessa Carlton sample, creating this twisted contrast between the upbeat melody and the cold-blooded lyrics celebrating murder. KTA wasn't going to let that slide. Julio Fulio, the charismatic leader of KTA, fired back with When I See You, a track that gained 24 million views and mocked the 2018 ambush with lyrics like Went out to eat on his birthday, for shot, 3 dead, smoking 23. The 23 was a direct reference to young Ace's dead brother. And Fulio wasn't done there. He had the audacity to reference Ksoo directly, rapping Bluing in that jam. I swear they need to free that man Ksoo, so he could catch a headshot. This war is taking place on multiple fronts, through social media posts, Instagram videos, and diss tracks. Theo would film videos at grave sites and memorials, amplifying the disrespect and re-traumatizing victims' families. Mothers of victims like BBY and Corbin Johnson expressed outrage over the mockery, with one stating it felt like reliving the trauma through viral videos. Ksoo played a crucial role in escalating this war beyond just words. His tracks like Ksoo and Been Dead contain lines mocking BBY's closed casket funeral, rapping about smoking Dirk and Bibby to the face. But it wasn't just the music. Ksoo would post on Instagram with pictures of Lil Buck captioned, "Bye-bye," essentially bragging about murders before they were even solved. The violence escalated throughout 2020 with Lil Buck's murder on January 15th, exactly 1 year after Willie Addison's death, representing the calculated nature of this revenge cycle. Fulio survived multiple attempts on his life, including being shot in the foot in 2020, but he kept taunting his enemies through music and social media. The major players in this deadly game read like a who's who of Jacksonville street elite. On the ATK side, you had young Gene Ace Kenyatta Bullet as the undisputed leader, a rapper with millions of followers who survived multiple shooting attempts and released hits that celebrated violence. Alongside him were Spinabs and Wapawit Chapoa from the NHE Hospital gang subset, who became viral sensations with their roles in Who I Smoke. The KTA/.
From today, from a 2-hour delay because of witnesses and technical issues from the court causing audio issues during testimony as well as closing arguments. And in a surprising twist, someone from the Robinson family was banned from the courtroom because they were live streaming testimony. However, despite all this, closing arguments did happen, but this was after Hakeem Robinson's older sister took the stand to defend her baby brother.
Hell no.
This was the immediate reaction from Hakeem Robinson's older sister when she first saw the photo of the
block side was anchored by Julio Jones, whose charisma and musical talent made him a local legend even as he survived assassination attempt after assassination attempt. Young soldiers like BBY and Lil Buck paid the ultimate price for their loyalty, while figures like Jake Jit and Rico Osama also fell victim to the endless cycle of retaliation. The arrest came swiftly. By late July 2024, Tampa Police and Jacksonville Sheriff's Office had arrested 5 suspects: Isaiah Chance, 23, Alicia Andrews, 21, Sean Gath, 18, Rashad Murphy, 30, and Davian Murphy, 27. There were 3 people who pulled the trigger. You saw it on the video. 5 people, though, are charged with murder. The level of planning and coordination between these 5 defendants was truly alarming. All are alleged members of ATK subsets and face first-degree murder charges. Evidence included surveillance footage showing the shooters, cell phone data tracking Fio's movements, and social media posts linking the suspects to the murder. Ksoo's role in this escalation cannot be overstated. His alleged involvement in both Bibi's 2019 murder and Lil Buck's 2020 killing represented a significant escalation in the violence, transforming personal grief into widespread retaliation. His family's deep involvement with Father Abdul Sr. as ATK's founder and brother Abdul Jr., also facing charges, showed how this wasn't just gang business, it was family business. The feud reached its bloody climax on June 23, 2024, when Julio was ambushed and killed during his 26th birthday celebration in Tampa. Julio had been kicked out of an Airbnb party due to overcrowding and relocated to a Holiday Inn, posting his location on Instagram stories, a fatal mistake that allowed his enemies to track him down. Around 4:40 a.m., masked gunmen ambushed Fio in the parking lot, firing over 100 rounds into his black Dodge Journey and killing him while wounding 3 others. Police described it as a targeted hit tied to the Jacksonville gang feud, with unconfirmed reports suggesting a $10,000 bounty from young nadies. The surviving members of both sides continue to trade threats and dices through social media, ensuring this cycle of violence is far from over. The human cost of this war extends far beyond the headlines. Jacksonville authorities continue monitoring for retaliation following Julio's death, knowing that each death demands another death. In the streets' twisted logic, families are torn apart by these violent acts, left to mourn and pick up the pieces. The impact on the community is immense. Fear grips every corner of this city as gang violence escalates. Children grow up watching their peers die or get hurt. Parents worry every day about their kids coming home safely. This war has consumed everything in its path, leaving a trail of destruction and bloodshed behind it. But amidst all the chaos, there's one thing that stands out: the resilience of the people affected by this violence. Despite everything they've been through, despite losing loved ones, friends, or community members to senseless killings, they still hold on. They are determined to see justice done for their fallen. They will continue to demand action from authorities and politicians until they feel safe again. This war may seem endless, but the people of Jacksonville won't let it defeat them without a fight. As we look at Ksoo, sentenced to life in prison, the question remains, what's next? Will this be enough to end the cycle of violence that has plagued the city for so long? Only time will tell. As Ksoo sat in his cell, awaiting his sentencing, it was hard to imagine that he once held such promise as a young rapper from Jacksonville's North Side. His music career had been marked by controversy and violence, but many saw him as a local legend, someone who captured the essence of life on the streets through his lyrics. But amidst all the chaos, there is one thing that stands out: the resilience of the people affected by this violence. Despite everything they've been through, despite losing loved ones, friends, or community members.
Alleged gunman in the 2020 killing of Charles McCormick, and was questioned if it was her younger brother. In court Wednesday, even now, years later, with her brother on trial accused of that murder, she testified there's no way that's him.
He was approximately 5'8" to 5'10", black male.
Tim Graham is now a retired JSO officer, but 5 years ago, on the day of the shooting, he was one of the officers chasing the shooter and gave the description of 5'8" and a bit athletic.
Did you see this person jump a couple of fences?
Absolutely.
He was able to evade Officer Prater?
And me.
Robinson's sister didn't hold back when describing her brother, painting a different
To senseless killings. They still hold on. They are determined to see justice done for their fallen. They will continue to demand action from authorities and politicians until they feel safe again. This war may seem endless, but the people of Jacksonville won't let it defeat them without a fight. As we look at Ksoo, sentenced to life in prison, the question remains, what's next? Will this be enough to end the cycle of violence that has plagued this city for so long? Only time will tell. But before we can even begin to ponder these questions, let's take a closer look at how Ksoo's music career was always secondary to his role as an enforcer for ATK. His alleged involvement in the February 2019 murder of 16-year-old Adrian BBY Gaynor Jr. marked his transformation from rapper to killer. Prosecutors allege Ksoo shot BBY over 60 times at Hilltop Village Apartments as retaliation for Willie Addison's death, showing a level of overkill that suggested deeply personal rage rather than just gang business. The murder was initially charged as second degree, but was upgraded to first-degree murder after a grand jury indictment. The case relies heavily on witness testimonies, including from Ksoo's own father, who implicated him, and social media posts where Ksoo allegedly mocked Bibby's death in his rap lyrics. A trial date was originally set for March 2025, but has been delayed to July 2025 due to outstanding discovery issues. But Ksoo's music career was always a means to an end, a way to document and celebrate real murders on social media. His Instagram posts and rap lyrics were dissected by investigators, with JSO Sergeant Christopher Smith testifying about how tracks like Ksoo Homicide contained details only the killer would know. The prosecution argued these weren't artistic expressions, but literal confessions to murder. The case also revealed the extent of the Robinson family's involvement in Jacksonville's gang violence. Ksoo's brother, Abdul Jr., faces separate charges for the same Lil Buck murder, while their father, Abdul Sr., cooperation with prosecutors created an unprecedented situation where a gang founder was testifying against his own sons. The family's deep entanglement in ATK operations showed how this wasn't just gang business, but literally family business. And what about Ksoo's social media activity? His Instagram posts and rap lyrics were dissected by investigators, with JSO Sergeant Christopher Smith testifying about how tracks like Ksoo Homicide contained details only the killer would know. The prosecution argued these weren't artistic expressions, but literal confessions to murder. The same social media posts and rap lyrics that made him a local legend became the evidence that sealed his fate. The same family loyalty that defined ATK became the betrayal that ensured his conviction when his father chose self-preservation over blood. At just 26 years old, Ksoo has likely seen the last free day of his life. The transformation from Hakeem Robinson, a young brother from Jacksonville's North Side with musical aspirations, to Ksoo, a convicted murderer facing life without parole, represents more than just one person's fall from grace. It's a cautionary tale about how the streets consume everything they touch: talent, family bonds, loyalty, and ultimately freedom itself. But perhaps the most damaging evidence came from Ksoo's own social media activity and music. His Instagram posts and rap lyrics were dissected by investigators, with JSO Sergeant Christopher Smith testifying about how tracks like Ksoo Homicide contained details only the killer would know. The prosecution argued these weren't artistic expressions, but literal confessions to murder. The case against Ksoo was built on a mountain of evidence: cell phone tower data that placed devices near the murder scene at the time of the killing, witness testimonies from his own father and others who implicated him in the crime, and social media posts where he allegedly mocked the victim's death. The prosecution argued that these weren't artistic expressions, but literal confessions to murder. The same family loyalty that defined ATK became the betrayal that ensured his conviction when his father chose.
He's around 6'3".
And keep in mind, shooter doesn't stop, say measure me. He's running and gunning.
The state argued that size descriptions may have varied because the shooter was in motion and it was a chaotic scene. During closing arguments, the state addressed the height and weight concerns, saying some witnesses didn't give the exact measurements because it was a quick, intense situation, adding that Robinson may have gained weight since the
Self-preservation over blood. At just 26 years old, Ksoo has likely seen the last free day of his life. His music career is over. His family is fractured beyond repair, and his name will forever be associated with the deadly gang war that consumed Jacksonville streets. The boy who grew up in a house where gang affiliation was a birthright became the man whose own father put him away forever, completing a cycle of violence and betrayal that defines the streets he claimed to represent. Yo fam, we have finally come to the end of the video. To be the first to get all trendy gossip happening in the DAP community, click on the card showing on the screen. But what about Ksoo's music career? His songs contributed to viral tracks like Who I Smoke that gained 33 million views, though his direct contributions were less prominent than those of Young Ace or Spinabins. The irony of Ksoo's situation isn't lost on those who followed his brief career. Here was a young man with legitimate musical talent, someone who could have potentially used rap as a way out of Jacksonville's violent streets. Instead, he chose to use his platform to celebrate and document real murders, essentially creating a trail of evidence that prosecutors would later use to put him away forever. With his conviction on July 31st, 2025 for Lil Buck's murder, Ksoo faces a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. His sentencing is scheduled for September 8th, 2025, where a judge will formally impose the life sentence. But that's not the end. He still awaits trial for Bibby's murder, where another life sentence could be imposed if convicted. The transformation from Hakeem Robinson, a young brother from Jacksonville's north side with musical aspirations, to Ksoo, a convicted murderer facing life without parole, represents more than just one person's fall from grace. It's a cautionary tale about how the streets consume everything they touch: talent, family bonds, loyalty, and ultimately freedom itself. His story shows how quickly someone can go from having the world at their fingertips to watching it slip away forever in a courtroom. The same social media posts and rap lyrics that made him a local legend became the evidence that sealed his fate. The same family loyalty that defined ATK became the betrayal that ensured his conviction when his father chose self-preservation over blood. At just 26 years old, Ksoo has likely seen the last free day of his life. The boy who grew up in a house where gang affiliation was a birthright became the man whose own father put him away forever, completing a cycle of violence and betrayal that defines the streets he claimed to represent. As the courtroom doors closed behind Ksoo, a sense of finality settled over the room. It was a moment that would change the trajectory of his life forever, a life that had once held so much promise, but ultimately succumbed to the harsh realities of Jacksonville streets. Hakeem Robinson, or Ksoo as he was known to his fans, had grown up surrounded by the rough edges of Northside Jacksonville. His early life was marked by an unyielding passion for music and a strong sense of family loyalty that defined ATK, Against the Kingdom, a local rap group that spoke to the struggles and triumphs of their community. But as he navigated the complexities of growing up in a world where gang affiliation often felt like a birthright, Ksoo's path diverged from his musical aspirations. The streets called, and he answered, entwining himself with the same violent cycle of betrayal and violence that defined ATK's lyrics. In the end, it was this very cycle that sealed his fate. The social media posts and rap lyrics that once made him a local legend became the evidence that convicted him of Bibby's murder. The family loyalty that had been such an integral part of his identity now felt like a betrayal, a painful reminder of how far he had fallen. At 26 years old, Ksoo sat in his cell, staring at the walls that would soon become his permanent home. It was a stark contrast to the world that once lay before him, full of possibility and promise. The boy who had grown up with music as his salvation now faced a lifetime behind bars. A harsh reminder that freedom is not just something you have, but also something you must fight for.
Charles was?
I did.
How close would you say you got to him?
All the way to him.
And what did you see?